This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to the Twilight Show. Thanks for joining me. Today my special guest is Lucy Mardell, and we will be talking about supporting visually impaired learners in mainstream classes.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Twilight Show, everyone. I'm Graham Stanley, speaking to you live from Mexico City. As I mentioned earlier on today's show, I'll be talking to Lucy Mardell about supporting visually impaired learners in mainstream classes. Lucy Mardell has worked for 20 years as an EFL, English as a Foreign Language teacher in the UK and overseas, including IELTS teaching and examining, teacher training for Edinburgh University, and specialising in young learners with the British Council. And since moving back to the UK in 2007, she has been working as a special needs teacher, specialising in visual impairment. Now, I'll be talking to Lucy about her work and more after the Teachers Talk Radio news.
Imagine having your own instructional coach available 24/7. Now you can with the Teaching How-Tos platform. This highly personalised social platform empowers busy teachers to learn and apply evidence-based teaching techniques, either independently, working collaboratively with their peers, or with our new AI assistant. The platform features over 160 visual guides to teaching techniques, designed to help you quickly and easily implement high-impact practices that boost student engagement and improve learning outcomes. Join over 200 institutions worldwide that are elevating their teaching practices with the How-To app. No gurus, just practical support anytime you need it. Interested in finding out more? Visit teachinghowtos.com and register for our next webinar.
Empowering education with Easy for You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionizes the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools. We're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy for You, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easyforyou.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading. Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
A lack of maintenance support is creating a two-tier higher education system, says a report in The Guardian. More than half of full-time students are working long hours in jobs to support themselves at university, according to a survey of UK undergraduates conducted by the Higher Education Policy Institute. The survey of 10,000 students found a record 56% had paid employment and were working an average of 14.5 hours per week. Experts said the lack of maintenance support was widening the divide between students who need to work to survive and their better-off peers who are free to concentrate on their studies. When combined with time spent attending lectures, classes and other study, students with part-time jobs are averaging a 48-hour working week, with some completing a 56-hour working week during term time. The average working time for adults in full-time jobs, according to the ONS, is just 36.6 hours per week. Higher Education Policy Institute's Rose Stevenson said the traditional model of higher education, with undergraduates studying full-time away from home, was becoming unattainable, and maintenance support would need to improve in order to support students with the cost of living. According to research, the cost of living crisis abruptly flipped the proportion of students mixing paid employment and full-time study. Before 2021, roughly 2/3 of students had no paid employment in term time. But this year, 56% of students said they had paid employment and were working longer hours than students in previous years. 3/4 said this was to meet their living costs, whilst 23% said it was to give financial support to families. 80% of students who had been in care were working in part-time jobs. The research also explored how working students completed their studies, with more being likely to use artificial intelligence programs and were more likely to view lectures online. Further details of the study and an additional report by the National Union of Students can be found online via the Guardian website. Money is also a feature in an article by Schools Week. It focuses on a response to a Conservative pledge to protect pupil funding in real terms. According to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, this could lead to the biggest school budget reduction for 50 years. The Conservative manifesto contains a promise to protect day-to-day school spending in real terms per pupil, but the IFS said this would work out as a £3.5 billion cut. This is because pupil numbers are due to fall by 400,000 by 2028. Meanwhile, Labour launched its manifesto with many media outlets covering its pledges on education. The National Education Union General Secretary welcomed the party's commitment to education, but said the proposals contained no indication that education cuts would be reversed. The NEU also expressed concern that Labour's pledge to recruit 6,500 teachers does not go far enough. The NASUWT union also commented on the recruitment pledge, saying it must go hand in hand with tackling the cause of the teacher retention crisis. Manifestos for all parties who have published them are available online. Away from the election, the BBC reports on an experiment undertaken by 10 teenagers from Salford. The teens swapped their smartphones for basic devices that could only make calls or send texts for a period of 5 days. The detox was run as part of a BBC project looking at the smartphone habits of young people. The report covers the positive impact the detox has, as well as the negatives. One of the participants dropped out after just 27 hours because not being online was really stressful. Some, however, found it liberating, as well as helping with sleep and engaging more with friends and family. Full details of the experiment and the responses of participants can be found on the BBC News website. Finally, as a follow-up on a story previously reported on Teachers Talk Radio News, Teesside University has announced it will help fund flights for Nigerian students hit by financial difficulties. Students from Nigeria were thrown off courses and ordered to leave the UK after a currency crisis left them struggling to pay tuition fees. The BBC Tees News website covered events and subsequent protests about the way students had been treated. This resulted in some intervention from the Nigerian government, but Teesside University has also told the BBC that it has re-enrolled some affected students and opened a travel fund, with a spokesperson saying, we are working with a small group who do need to return to their home country and are opening an international relief fund to offer additional financial support for those unexpected travel costs. Some students have been told they can complete their studies from Nigeria or return to the UK at a later date to complete. Full details of the story can be found on the BBC News website, Teesside section. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News from Joe Fox.
And welcome back, everybody, and a welcome in particular to my special guest, Lucy Mardell. Welcome, Lucy. What
Hi,
have you been
Graham.
up to today?
Well, because it's a Saturday, I started my day with Park Run. That's my Saturday thing. And unfortunately, in the UK at the moment, it is a little bit wintry, so I got absolutely drenched.
Oh, really?
Absolutely drenched. Yeah, it's cold and wet at the moment.
But Lucy, it's mid-June. Isn't it?
I know.
Supposed to be the height of summer in the UK?
Do you know what? We're tempted to put the heating on. It's it's shocking.
So,
but there you
so
go.
is the summer over, or is it just not turned up yet?
We're hoping for summer soon. Yeah, we're hoping. We're fingers crossed. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hope it comes soon as well. So you said you were doing Park Run. What is Park Run?
Park Run's been going for about 20 years. It started in the UK in Bushy Park in London, and it now runs in, I think, about 15, 20 countries worldwide. It's every Saturday morning at 9:00, and it's 5 kilometres.
Oh, right. Great. And how long have you been doing that?
I've been doing it for about 6 years.
Oh, great.
So I've got my 100 T-shirts. When you hit milestones, you get T-shirts. It's all very competitive. You get stats, you get PBs. Oh, it's wonderful.
Sounds fantastic. I'm sure it keeps you fit.
It does, and it's very sociable as well. And when you go on holiday, you find the nearest Park Run.
Oh, excellent. I'll have to look for one in Mexico, although I think my running days may be over now.
It's never too late to start running.
Well, we'll see. So, Lucy, I usually start by asking my guests to talk about how they became teachers. So I'd love to hear what it was that attracted you to the world of education.
I can't remember a time when I wasn't a teacher. I suppose my mum was a primary school teacher, so I think I sort of followed her footsteps. I did a PGCE straight after university, and I was a primary school teacher for about a year, and then I thought I'd try TEFL instead. Yeah.
Is that when you went to Portugal?
Where did I go? No, my first TEFL job was Prague, when it was still Czechoslovakia.
Right.
So that was the year after the Berlin Wall came down. And I taught, it was actually in a primary school. Yeah. I was teaching English in a primary school. Yeah.
So that must have been an exciting time to be in Prague.
It was fascinating. It was really fascinating. Yeah. Things were changing. Yeah. So young people were very excited, and old people found it very stressful.
Oh, yeah. Really?
So it was a really interesting time to be there. But yeah, I lost a lot of weight because the food was awful.
Oh, really? Oh dear. What kind of food were you eating, or what kind of food were you not eating?
Well, there wasn't. There were still sort of shortages, so it was that sort of very communist thing that if you saw a queue in a shop, you joined it, just in case it was something that you might need,
but without knowing what it actually was.
Yeah, or you just check if anybody in the queue knew what they were queuing for, and. There weren't very many fresh vegetables, so most of our vegetables in the winter were in jars. And I ate at the school, and the school dinners were absolutely awful. It was a lot of lentils, a lot of dumplings.
Right.
Yeah.
Apart
Rubber
from the
dumplings.
food, did you have a good time there? And how long did you stay? Was it just a year?
It was just a year. Yeah. No, it was fantastic. It was an amazing experience, and I travelled around Bohemia and Slovakia. Yeah, it was, and I've never been so cold. It got really cold in the winter, which was interesting experience. Yeah.
And then when you left Prague, where did you go?
That's a good question. I came back to England, and I think then that's when I did my training as a TEFL teacher. I went to International House and trained, because I hadn't actually trained for TEFL at that point. I'd just done my primary school training. And then after I did the TEFL training, I went with International House to Portugal for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm. And that was to Lisbon, is that right?
No, that was first to Viseu, where my grandmother came from, and then to Coimbra, the university city. Yeah. Really, really beautiful cities. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know Coimbra or Viseu. I just know Lisbon and Porto. I need to go and explore more of Portugal.
Oh, Coimbra is really beautiful. It's an old university city, and when the students graduate, they have this amazing festival or celebration called Queima das Fitas, where the burning of the ribbons, and they have live music and 3 days of drunken music listening. Yeah, and I was a bit younger. It was good fun. Yeah.
Great. I'll have to go. And so how did you find the change between teaching primary to teaching TEFL?
I think it was probably quite an easy change, because so many of the techniques that you use as a primary school teacher, you can transfer to any teaching, because you can't assume as a primary teacher that your students understand the instructions or want to do what you're asking them to do. So I think you have to be pretty high on motivation and pretty high on making sure that you've got a variety of activities, that it doesn't get boring.
Right.
So, yeah. But I had to remember to treat.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I just had to remember to treat them like adults. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You mean treating the kids like adults, or treating the adults like adults?
Treating the adults like adults. Yeah.
Yes. I have to admit, I have come across a couple of primary school teachers who, when they teach adults or talk to other teachers, they have a way of doing it that makes you feel a little bit like a young learner.
Yes, yeah. You have to change. You have to change your style. Yes, definitely. There is a primary school teacher voice, which you have to try to drum out of yourself.
And so, after Portugal, was that when you left to go to Barcelona?
No, that was when I went back to the UK, I think, after Portugal. Yeah, I went back to the UK and taught in Oxford, taught multilingual classes in Oxford, in a language school. And that's when I was also an IELTS examiner, and we did a lot of IELTS courses.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was really interesting. Yeah.
And I also have actually, you did teacher training for Edinburgh University. Was that after that?
That was the one. After Oxford, I joined the British Council. I was in Portugal, then I was in Barcelona, and that was pretty well all with young learners. So then that's when I started working in Edinburgh University in the summers, and I also did a master's in teaching English to young learners.
Okay. And in Barcelona is where we met.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
When you were
quite a while ago, I think.
It was.
As it turns out.
How time flies.
Yes.
And then back in 2007, I believe it was, you went back to the UK, and that is when you became a special needs teacher, or am I missing something?
Yeah, so when I was in Barcelona, I volunteered with the Catalan Blind Association,
right?
And they were absolutely brilliant, and they taught me all sorts of skills for guiding, sighted guiding. I learned the basics of Braille. I learned the alphabet in Braille in Spanish, first of all. And so when a job came up with the British Council in Dubai, teaching visually impaired learners, everybody just said, "Oh, Lucy, you should apply for that. You're probably the only person in the British Council who knows Braille." So I did apply for that, and then so I spent 2 years in Dubai teaching English to visually impaired adults, and that's where I sort of got a taste for working with visually impaired students. Yeah.
So, what was it about the visually impaired that attracted you towards? Was it something you just fell into because of the volunteering you did in Barcelona, or was there a kind of other reason for why you have decided to specialize, if you like, in supporting the visually impaired?
I think it was the very positive experience I had in Barcelona. And I enjoyed it very much. For one thing, it really helped my Spanish, which sounds quite selfish. When you're talking to blind people in particular, obviously language is absolutely crucial. So when I was guiding people in Barcelona, and I was doing it in Spanish, not in Catalan, because my Catalan just wasn't good enough. I had to be really precise. And so when we were going for a walk and I was explaining what was around us, or we went to visit a museum and I was explaining about the exhibits, I had to be really precise and accurate in my language. I couldn't just say, well, this or that, or look at this thing. I had to describe it. So my Spanish just went through the roof. And I suppose that gave me a very positive experience. So I realised that actually, in terms of sort of language acquisition, it was, language is just absolutely crucial for blind learners. And when I went to Dubai, again, the students were so positive, and it was, for most of them, it was the first experience they'd had being in this training centre of an educational environment that was really designed for their needs.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very.
How was it designed for their needs?
We had very small classes. We had lots of technology and lots of resources. So all of the learning, or pretty well all of the learning, was electronic. So all of the students used software on their computers or on their they all had PCs that read what was on the screen. It had screen readers, and you can pay for those, but there are also free ones. There's one called NVDA that's a free screen reader, and in fact now on all Apple devices they have a voiceover built in as standard, so you can navigate a computer screen as a completely blind user without needing to see the screen. So I rather lazily used to turn their screens round so that I could, without even having to stand up, I could see what they were doing from sitting at my desk, because they didn't need the screen. So everything would be on tech. And then I took a lot of tactile resources in. So whatever we were learning about, I would have models, or I would have the real thing. And the whole of the learning was based on on tactile resources or audio resources, and there was no sort of describe this picture or any of the sort of things that you might use in a EFL classroom. Yeah.
Interesting. There's a question in the chat here from Ron Hearn about Braille computers and keyboards. Did they exist? Do they exist? Is it something you recommend using?
So most of our learners learn to touch type on a QWERTY keyboard, and they use audio. There are also Braille input devices. So there's a sort of Braille computer called a Braille Note. Well, there are several of them that have the 6-key Braille input, because Braille consists of 6 dots, and so 6 keys correspond to those 6 dots. So you can write anything with those 6 keys. So you've got that as your input, but a lot of people, well, pretty well all of our students actually, will use both the QWERTY keyboard and the Braille keyboard. And you can also get a refreshable Braille display, which allows you to read the Braille. But that's particularly good if you want to edit what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So you've got a sort of a display which has little pins, plastic pins, and as you read each line, the pins refresh, and you get the next line of Braille. It's all very high tech, but most of our students will use a QWERTY keyboard. Yeah.
Right. Would that be a QWERTY keyboard with some kind of tactile Braille or otherwise?
No, I mean,
on it or not? Or just get used to the layout of the keys.
So any standard keyboard obviously had the 2 home keys, J and what are they? J and F, I think. Have tiny little ridges on them that you can find with your J and F. Yeah, that you can find, and that's what you put when you learn to touch type. That's what you put your index finger on, and you just learn to move your other fingers. And I mean, that's what touch typists don't need to look at what they're doing.
Of course.
And then if you use the control key, you can navigate the whole of the screen without needing to use the mouse. So if you watch somebody using a computer with a screen reader, the screen reader is telling them what they're clicking on, and they're navigating using the control keys, the arrows, the tabs. Yeah.
Right.
It's fascinating to watch. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet.
Or listen to. Yeah.
And what about things that have changed since you were in Dubai? Has the technology, have the ways of teaching the visually impaired changed a lot?
Well, I mean, I suppose I was very lucky in Dubai because I had all the resources I need, and because all of my teaching was for groups of visually impaired learners. Mm. But of course, back in the UK, most of my the students that I work with are in mainstream schools, and they are probably the only student in their school who is used. So the Braille students will probably be the only student in the school who uses Braille. So they won't have, the classes won't be fully designed for their needs, but they will have staff supporting them who are acting as sort of intermediaries. So the class teachers will send through the work to the teaching assistants, and the teaching assistants will either print it out, emboss it out in Braille, or they'll save it onto the students' laptop so that they can read it with a screen reader. Yeah,
right. So it's
an awful lot of work. Yeah, and I think people don't always appreciate. Well, the teachers appreciate after a while how much time goes into preparing the resources for the students.
Right, and is it that they try to integrate the visually impaired students into the usual classrooms and just accommodate for them with the extra resources and assistance. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes. So the students are fully integrated in the mainstream classes, and they just have the materials, the resources adapted for their needs. Yeah.
And what exactly is your role now, Lucy?
So I'm a QTVI, a qualified teacher of the visually impaired. So my job is to support the students, to support the school, to be able to educate the students alongside their peers. I have a caseload of about 40 or 50 students, and I'm based in Brighton, so they could be in any school or college in Brighton. My caseload go from preschoolers, from babies up to the age of 25.
Wow.
And of those students, 4 of them use Braille. So most of them have a sort of level of visual impairment, but they don't need to use Braille.
Ah, okay. So it's for that reason, not for any other reason.
Yeah. So the rest of my caseload will have a visual impairment, but a sort of moderate to mild visual impairment. They'll probably need large print or different adaptations.
Right. And do you end up on a typical day? Is it that you're traveling around different schools in the Brighton area then?
Absolutely. Yeah. Usually 3 schools a day. So I might start off in a preschool, in a nursery, and then I might go to an A-level business class, and then I might be in the afternoon in a special school with a child in a sensory room. So it's a bit of everything. It's fascinating. Yeah.
Wow, it's quite a varied work that you do then.
It's so varied. Yes. Yeah.
So you mentioned. Sorry, you have to be.
You have to be a jack of all trades.
Of course, I can imagine. But it's so good that support exists in schools now. I'm imagining that isn't something that has been in place for many years, or am I wrong?
So the traditional model was that if you had a high level of need, you would be expected to go to a school for the blind. Mm-hmm. There were maybe half a dozen, maybe a dozen round the country, and you would, if there wasn't one very close to you, you would be expected to board, and that was the model. But certainly in the last couple of decades, the expectation is that mainstream schools are supported to have visually impaired students in integrated in the classes. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And we're lucky in Brighton. We have quite a few, have a little team of visually impaired teachers of the visually impaired. We work alongside teachers of the deaf, and other specialist teachers who support students with autism, students with other sort of levels of need, literacy needs, communication needs.
Right. I imagine the awareness of the kind of support that a lot of special educational needs and disabled students need has changed a lot and has become more important to provide that support in recent years.
Yes. I mean, I think the demands on schools are huge. And I was talking to a SENCO, a special education coordinator, on Friday, and she was saying that the level of needs of their students is just increasing and increasing. There's a higher incidence of need. There are more and more students being diagnosed with autism, with ADHD, with visual processing difficulties. And the schools are expected to meet those needs, and the level of support is, of course, being cut back because local authorities don't have the money. So it's pretty tough on schools. Yeah.
So the awareness that the support needs to be improved and increased is going hand in hand with the lack of funds to actually provide that support.
Yeah. Yes, and I think also since COVID, the levels of anxiety and the levels of mental health support needed in schools has gone through the roof as well. There are a lot of very anxious children in schools. Yeah.
Has that obviously, because of COVID, that was that increased, but do you think that it's still the case that there are lots of anxious children because of that, or has it sort of settled down a bit more?
It probably sort of revealed a lot of problems that were there but were sort of a little bit hidden. And I think because for a generation of students, they realise that you don't actually have to learn at school. For students and for parents, they sort of felt that maybe going to school was perhaps optional, slightly. So attendance isn't as good post-COVID across the city, and yeah, there are just more children who are just finding it hard to go back into school. Yeah.
Interesting. And has there been an increase in homeschooling, for example, or just an increase in absence from school?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what. Anecdotally, I would say there probably has been an increase in homeschooling. Yeah. Yeah.
And what about
That's true.
During the pandemic, during lockdown, when the schools were closed, how did your job and role change when it came to supporting the students?
So as soon as the school for the most needy students, the schools weren't closed for very long. So as soon as they went back, we tried to go into schools, but at the beginning we were sort of only allowed to go into one school a week and then maybe one school a day. But when the students were at home, it worked quite well for me because one of my Braillists, one of the girls that I work with who learns through Braille, was at the point where she was learning fully contracted Braille. So Braille has two sort of levels. There's a level of just the alphabet, so you can just learn the dots for each letter. And then that's called uncontracted Braille. And then contracted Braille is a little bit like shorthand. You learn what clusters of letters can be represented by. So there's a set of dots for ing or a set of dots for an ed ending. And then some letters stand for whole words. And it's fascinating because Braille sort of, was developed quite a long time ago, in the 1800s, I think. And so a lot of the contractions come from sort of quite early Braille, when basically Braille readers were reading the Bible and writing letters home. So so M stands for mother, K stands for knowledge, S with a dot in front of it is spirit. There's a contraction for Lord, but there isn't obviously a contraction for computer because that came along quite late. So a lot of the words that are the short forms aren't that useful nowadays. But we still have to learn them all. But yeah, so my student was learning the short forms, and there are 200 rules for the short forms in English, and we had an hour a day to do that over the phone, and we did it over FaceTime.
Wow.
she had a Braille book in front of her. I had the same book in front of me, and we read it together. And as soon as we came across a new contraction that she didn't know what the dots meant, I told her what it was, and then that would be repeated in the book. And yeah, she learnt the whole of the contracted form of Braille that way. It was very successful.
That's
bizarrely.
Great. So she probably benefited from the actual experience then, that lockdown.
I think in terms of Braille, she did, because if she'd been at school, I would probably have got half an hour a week to do that with her.
Right.
So that was handy for us. Yeah.
So Lucy, I imagine, is there a big difference when it comes to Braille in other languages? And were you expected to learn Braille outside of English when you were in Dubai, for example?
I didn't learn any Arabic Braille. I did learn a little bit. So the letters sounds that are the same in Arabic. So alif, which is an is the same dot. It's the same set of dots. Well, it's the same dot. It's just dot one in English and in Arabic. And I think there's a t sound in Arabic. I'm pretty sure, and that's the same set of dots as the t in Roman languages, in the Roman alphabet. So if the sounds are the same, then the set of dots will be the same. And Braille in every language is read left to right. Mm-hmm. So in Arabic, it's read left to right in Braille. In Chinese, it's read left to right, rather than rather than vertically. So there's a lot of similarities in each language where there are. So, for example, in Spanish, I'm doing Spanish with one of my Braillists, and we've had to learn what the acute vowel sounds are. What the contractions are for those, so we write those differently, and enya is obviously a new letter for us.
New letter,
yeah. But I don't think that Spanish has the same set of contractions. I think there are some contractions for Spanish, but not as many as there are in English.
Imagine having your own instructional coach available 24/7. Now you can with the Teaching How-Tos platform. This highly personalised social platform empowers busy teachers to learn and apply evidence-based teaching techniques, either independently, working collaboratively with their peers, or with our new AI assistant. The platform features over 160 visual guides to teaching techniques, designed to help you quickly and easily implement high-impact practices that boost student engagement and improve learning outcomes. Join over 200 institutions worldwide that are elevating their teaching practices with the How-To app. No gurus, just practical support anytime you need it. Interested in finding out more? Visit teachinghowtos.com and register for our next webinar.
Empowering education with Easy for You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionises the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy for You, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easyforyou.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading. Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Right.
As
And
I
how
understand
about
it, yeah.
when you came to learn Braille, was it something you found easy to learn, or did it take a while for you to get used to it?
I, like all, I think, sighted Braille learners, I read it by sight. I don't learn, I can't read Braille with my
Okay.
fingers. Yeah, that's a bit of a misconception that if you're a Braille teacher or anyone sighted, it's unusual to learn to read Braille with your fingers.
So you learn
Because
through the patterns on the actual page.
yeah, you're just looking at the patterns of dots. Yeah, and actually, what we tend to do is we learn it as a pattern, but we also learn it as a sequence of numbers, because when you're doing it on the Braille typewriter, it's called a Perkins because it came from the Perkins Institute, where Helen Keller studied, and it's been the same design, I think, for the last 150 years. So the pattern of dots, you have to sort of know the numbers of the dots to type with the Perkins. So I sort of tend to know letters as being a series of numbers. So B is 1, 2, and C is 1, 3, 1, 4, for example. Yeah.
Wow.
That's how I think of it.
Because of the way that a sighted person interprets Braille, then does it not cause difficulties if you're trying to teach how to read Braille to a visually impaired student?
So it's useful to know when they're brailing, when they're writing, it's useful to know the numbers of the dots. It's useful for them to help them know which keys to press. But when you're teaching the shapes of the letters, you do a lot of work on tactile recognition. So you do a lot of pre-Braille activities, making sure that children have the level of children or adult. It's very rare that we would teach Braille to a teenager, but that's another story.
Is that because they probably already know it, or?
So every now and then you find a child who's got a degenerative condition where they start losing their sight a bit later on. And those children do sometimes learn Braille, but it's more likely, particularly if they were, say, a teenager, it's more likely that they would do all their learning on the computer, that they would learn to touch type and they would learn those computer skills straight away.
Right.
Because you want them to be ready to take exams and you want them to have the skills to manage in life, like, very quickly. And as a life skill, Braille's not as useful. There's not that much Braille once you leave education.
Right.
Yeah, there's sort of Braille in lifts and Braille signage, but it's pretty hit and miss.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I suppose what you were talking about before with Apple computers, and in particular the kind of improvements with artificial intelligence now, and the fact that you have so much more sort of speech to text and text to speech. Is this an improvement for visually impaired, do you think?
Absolutely, yeah. So if you, in the olden days, if as a Braille reader, if you wanted to read a book, you had to wait till it came out. That you had to wait till the RNIB managed to. The RNIB is the Royal National Institute of the Blind, produced it in Braille, and then it came out in their Braille library. And obviously, if it was something very popular, it would be difficult for them to produce enough copies of it in the Braille library. So you'd be waiting. Whereas now, as soon as something comes out electronically, as soon as something comes out on a Kindle, you can access it exactly the same time as everybody else. So those things have made a huge difference. And you know, GPS has revolutionized opportunities for blind people to sort of to get around more easily as well. You know, we've all got on our phones, like, you know, our phones can tell us where we are and tell us where to go and speak to us. Yeah. And in fact, just in terms of in the kitchen, a blind person's kitchen will be full of devices that speak. You have talking microwaves, you can have talking dish. Do you have talking dish? Or you might not. Not everything might speak, but you'd have beeps on everything and little bumps on everything to tell you where the buttons were. Yeah,
that's fascinating. I'd love to. What kind of things would a talking microwave do then? The obvious, I suppose, the obvious sort of settings would be
absolutely. So
spoken out loud.
Yeah, so if you pressed a button, a little bit like VoiceOver, if you've ever turned VoiceOver on an iPhone or an iPad, it works slightly differently, so that when you touch a button, it will tell you what the button is, and if you want to activate the button, you have to press it twice.
Right.
So that's how most speech things. The trouble is, if you turn VoiceOver on, all the commands are completely different, and then you have to get another device to Google how to turn VoiceOver off. It's quite dangerous if you do it without knowing how to turn it off.
Right. It sounds like you're speaking from experience there.
I am, yes. Yeah, I did do that. Yes, and then I was stuck. Yeah.
So you had to go to another device to learn how to turn it off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Lucy, before to go back to something you said before that I kind of took note of but didn't ask you back then, is that you were talking about how you might, in the course of a day while you're supporting the visually impaired in different schools, go to a sensory room. Could you explain a little bit more about what that is?
They tend to be located in special schools, so schools for children with learning difficulties, and although they I think more and more being introduced in mainstream schools, and they can be used for different things. So it'll be a very quiet environment. It's usually got dark walls, so when you turn the lights off, it can be completely dark. You'll have different sources of lighting. You might have a bubble tube. You might have mats on the floor so that you can sit on the floor. You'll probably have things with different textures to touch, and you might have a diffuser with different scents, and it can act differently for different students. So it tends to be a sort of calming environment for a lot of students, where they can sort of go to regulate and to sort of de-stress if they're finding things difficult. But it can also be a teaching tool. So with visually impaired students, we would often use the sensory room to help a child to sort of use their vision, whatever vision they had, as best as possible. So you would have maybe one light source, and you would sort of support them to focus on that light source, and it might be something that moved around or that you wanted them to interact with. So it can be used as just a calming space, or it can be used as an educational space. depending on need. Yeah.
Wow. And what about the teachers, Lucy? So do you find you've already talked about supporting the actual learners in your job, but do you do much, if any, training for teachers or helping teachers adapt to visually impaired students in their classes?
Absolutely. So most of our one-to-one teaching, well, all of our one-to-one teaching is with the blind students, but then the rest of our caseload will be with students who are being integrated in a mainstream class, and they might not necessarily have anybody who's working one-to-one with them. So in that case, all of our support is for the teachers. We offer lots of training. We can do bespoke training in schools, or we have sessions during the year where we invite teachers and teaching assistants and special needs coordinators to come and train with us. And a lot of it is about, well, a lot of it is about sort of planning ahead. If you're going to do these things, then this is what you need to bear in mind to make it accessible for a visually impaired student. If you're going to use these resources, make sure that the students can see them, but that you think about their needs, but also in a way that doesn't single them out. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we try to encourage teachers to do is to make sure that the students can see everything okay and access everything okay, but not to ask them in front of everybody else, so that they feel different. Yeah.
So the whole idea is to make sure that they're integrated as much as possible within the class. Basically.
Yeah. Yes, and a lot of the things that we're asking teachers to do are actually good practice. So it's things like, when you're writing on the board, read aloud as you're writing, so that everybody knows. And to be honest, if you go into a lot of mainstream classes, especially secondary schools, and you look at the board at the end of the lesson, it's a jumble of stuff. Right. And actually, even the fully sighted students might find it difficult to read. So it's just good practice. Yeah.
And so could you talk us through, if a teacher has no experience of having a visually impaired student in class and you're meeting that teacher for the first time, what are the first kind of things that you would try to get the teacher to become aware of or to do?
One of the things that we talk about a lot is using radio language instead of television language. So and one of the ways that we will help teachers to understand this is by playing an advert from the television and then an advert from the radio. And of course, with a television advert, you're relying so heavily on the images. Sometimes there's absolutely no clue at all from the sound of what's happening. But on a radio advert, it's all narrated and explained, and that's what we sort of want the teachers to think about whenever they're using language, to make sure, well, they're using language all the time, to make sure that whatever is going on in the classroom is as explicit as possible, and they're not relying on vague language. Oh, look at this, what I've just written on the board, or over here there is something, that they're being very precise about the language that they're using, and they're thinking about where the student needs to sit, what size of text they might need, if they need to take a break from visual activities. One of the things that we're doing a lot of training on at the moment is something called cerebral visual impairment, which is which can be described as visual processing difficulties. And over half of our caseload now, probably about 2/3 of our caseload, are children whose eyes work fine, but the messages to their brain, or the way that their brain is processing the messages, isn't particularly clear. And it's quite hard for teachers, quite hard for most of us actually, to sort of really understand what that means for the child. So we do a lot of training to help teachers understand that it might be something for the child. It might be a little bit like it is for us when we're doing a Where's Wally, that we're looking at a scene that is just got so much information visually that we can't make sense of it. So we talk a lot to teachers about simplifying the visual input. So just giving a piece of information at a time, or if they're giving worksheets, reducing the amount of information on the page, or perhaps giving actually just cutting it up and giving one question at a time. Not asking students to look and listen at the same time, because some students find it difficult to process two sensory inputs at the same time. And giving breaks to the students.
How often should a teacher think about giving a break to the students?
It's really difficult to say, and what we try to do with our students from very early on is to give them the tools to be able to say, I need a break now. Because if they've got somebody working with them, that teaching assistant can probably say, I think you're not able to focus at the moment. I think you need to take a break. I think you need to do something else. But if there isn't anybody with them, then the child will need to be able to recognise for themselves, I can't process anymore now, because it's not going in. And I think that's true for a lot of children who are neurodivergent, so children or learners with autism, with ADHD, that they need to be able to recognise for themselves when there's just it's almost that they've come to the end of their processing capacity, and they need to maybe reboot by taking a break. And it's difficult for teachers to know that, and it would be difficult to say to teachers, so after every 20 minutes, because actually the student might be very in tune with what the teacher's talking about, or it might be that they've had a really heavy day and they're absolutely exhausted and they can't take in any more after a couple of minutes. So it really needs to be the students who are monitoring it.
Yeah, and the teacher needs to be aware of that and to keep an eye on it as well if possible, I suppose. And it is hard if you've got a class of 30 and you've got a lot of different needs within that class. It's a lot. It's a lot to keep your eye on. And especially if the student who's got the visual processing difficulties is quite quiet and doesn't want to draw attention to themselves, then that's not the student that you're going to be focusing on. And in general, how do the other learners, how are they with, if there's a visually impaired student in the class, are they generally okay, or is that something teachers have to be attentive about as well?
It very much depends on the child and their levels of resilience and their sociability. With the blind students, it can be tricky because you miss out on all of those non-verbal cues, and especially by the time you get up to secondary school, when teenagers are talking to each other, they're just checking each other out all the time. They're sort of watching each other. They're watching each other all the time and sort of picking up on facial expressions. And so our blind students are missing out on all of those things. The other thing to put in the mix is that there's quite a high correlation between severe visual impairment, so the blind students, and autism. There's quite a strong crossover. So a couple of my blind students are also autistic. And so learning social skills, learning how to communicate with their peers is something that I'm teaching as part of their adapted curriculum. So we actually have social skills sessions, and we learn about what's appropriate and how to start a conversation and how to listen to your peers, and we practice that because it doesn't come naturally to all of the students. Yeah.
Right. And I imagine for your professional development, Lucy, you end up finding yourself having to become a lot more aware of a lot of other special educational needs and how to incorporate tactics or strategies into your work as well.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes. Particularly autism. We have very strong links with the autism team, and we use a lot of the strategies that they come up with. But there is a lovely little saying: once you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person, and you absolutely can't generalize.
I was going to ask you about that, because there's a lot more, I think, awareness that autism isn't just one thing. It affects different people in lots of different ways.
Absolutely, yes. I don't know if you probably don't have access to the iPlayer, do you?
No, I don't.
In Mexico, no. So Chris Packham, the naturalist, did a series of programs. He has autism, and he did a series of programs where he interviewed and worked with adults with autism, and they made films about how it impacted their lives, and they were all completely different. And probably the most powerful, the most impactful one was a young chap who I think is in his 20s, and he's non-verbal. No, it's not non-verbal. So he doesn't use, he doesn't speak, but he does communicate, and he uses an iPad to communicate his messages. And it was absolutely phenomenal hearing what he was saying through his iPad, through the voice on his iPad. Somebody that you would sort of think, I don't think he understands what I'm saying. I don't have to communicate with him, but he was understanding absolutely everything, and it was a very powerful film. Yeah.
Wow, I've just looked it up. Is that the series called Inside Our Autistic Minds? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
I'll try and see if I can check that out in some way.
Sounds
really interesting. So, what kinds of autism have you come across then with the visually impaired or the students that you're meeting? What kind of differences or variations have you experienced with your students?
So, a lot of the challenges for our students, it sort of comes from the not being able to see things from somebody else's perspective, literally, and sort of not understanding the rules of social interaction. So we sort of do a lot about, actually, this would be an appropriate thing to say in this situation. But it's difficult because for a neurotypical person, you sort of know generally what is acceptable and what isn't, and then you generalize. If somebody's just told you that they're nervous about the weekend, then you'd ask them why, and you'd make guesses as to what they might be worried about. Whereas if you have autism, if you have difficulties with communication and socialization, every situation is brand new, and generalizing can be difficult. So you'd have to sort of learn what to say if somebody said, I'm nervous about the weekend, or I'm apprehensive about doing something else. For us, that's sort of the same set of social rules, but for somebody with social and communication difficulties, that might be a different set of strategies in each situation. So it's a lot about sort of learning to generalize and sort of sentences and conversation starters that you can use in various situations.
So how do you help teachers deal with that then? Is it about emphasizing that they have to stop generalizing and learn more about each individual student's needs and reactions? Is it something related to that?
Yes, I think you're right, and a lot of so the autism team encourage students to develop their own profiles, sort of all about me. This is what I find difficult. This is what helps me. These are the strategies that I try to use. These are the things that you can do to help me in class. And we do that with our learners as well. And we produce little presentations for the next teacher, sort of from a template, but the students pick and choose what helps them, what they might need help with, what the teacher can do for them, and also what they would like their classmates to do for them, or what they'd like their classmates to understand. And we revisit this every, sort of annually. And what we want the students to do is to be able to self-advocate, so that when we're not there, they can say to the teachers, or they can say to their next teacher, actually, this is what this is what helps me, this is what I'd like you to do. But it's difficult. It's difficult to ask a teenager to go up to every teacher in their school, because they'll have that they come across in their school day, because they might have 20 different teachers or 15 teachers, and to say to each one of those teachers, this is what I need. It doesn't come easily.
No.
To most of the students, yeah.
Is it the teenagers that you think that's most difficult with compared to the younger students, the children or the adults?
It totally is. It totally is, yeah. So we, at primary school, I mean, obviously they've only got one teacher at primary school, but at primary school, they tend to own their differences. They, so often they're proud of who they are, which is absolutely lovely. And I had one lad say to me, I like it when you come and visit me, because you remind me of how special I am.
Wow.
Because I've got this visual impairment and I'm different from the others. And they'll very often feel comfortable telling their teacher what it is they need. Oh my goodness, as soon as they hit teenage, there is a biological imperative that they have to be the same as everybody else. It's a survival strategy. And they can't accept the things that they need, and it's very frustrating.
Do you think that changes though as the teenage years goes on? Does it get better, or does it sort of hit a peak of? Is there a particular age where you say it's worse than 15 or 13? Can you not generalize?
No, you can. So the sort of years, the first 3 years of secondary school, we call that year 7, 8, 9. Those are generally the worst. As soon as they hit year 10 and 11, they're on their GCSE courses, they're on their exam courses, and they suddenly realise, hopefully they realise in year 10, if not, they realise in year 11, which is a little bit late in the day, actually, this is what I need in order to pass, in order to get to the next stage. And that's when they generally start using the strategies and the support again.
So do you think the focus on exams and the need to do well in them helps?
I think it helps to focus them for some of them, yeah. Particularly if they know what they want to do after school, if they know what they're aiming for, then they know that actually I need to get, well, unfortunately, they all need to get maths and English. So however difficult they find maths and English, they have to keep going with that. But if they realise the importance of those things, then they will generally engage with the support. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then once they get to sixth form college, once they're 17, 18, and they're doing the courses that they've chosen to do, they will usually accept the support then, which is nice. Yeah. It's easier for us. Yeah.
Of course. And what about, I'm going to ask you, this is a bit of a thought experiment, Lucy, but if money were no object, we all know it is, and you were talking earlier about lack of resources and lack of funding, etc. But in your role, or for schools, if money were no object and you could decide how to best support the learners with visual impairment, what do you think would be on your wish list? What would you start with? What kind of things would schools, or would you need to make things easier for the students and the teachers?
I think so. We're very lucky in the UK that we have a system of teaching assistants, and it used to be that all classes would have teaching assistants to support the teacher and to support the learners, but obviously that's been cut back. So I would put the teaching assistants back in the classrooms so that the teacher had somebody else in the classroom, and somebody that could just check on those students that needed the extra support. I would have more staff available so that the schools had the staff available to be trained up by people like me to know how to support the visually impaired students within their school. So that, particularly thinking about secondary schools where they're likely to have, they're going to have more than one. They're going to have, some of our secondary schools will have sort of about 10 visually impaired students. So we would like there to be expertise within the school, and somebody to have time to make resources, somebody to have time to produce worksheets in the size and the of print that our students need. We have in year 6, at the end of primary school, the children do exams called SATs, standardized tests, and I went in one Friday before the SATs in May and spent 3 hours reformatting the reading exam for one of my students, because they'll produce it in large print, but this student, because of her visual impairment, she can't scan along a line of text. She misses the second half of the text because she's got visual field loss in both eyes. So she reads in columns. So I had, and the exam wasn't available electronically. I had to type out the entire exam onto a computer, reformat it into columns to print out for her. And then, of course, we had to destroy the copy on the computer. So there is, to do things properly, it takes a huge amount of time. So I would have people available in schools to be able to produce those resources, and to be able to, ideally, I'd have 3D printers in all the schools to be able to produce, for example, in geography, relief maps, or diagrams of the water cycle in a tactile format, in a 3D format. That would be absolutely wonderful. At the moment, we rely quite heavily on my husband, who is amazing, to produce tactile diagrams or tactile pictures using layers of cardboard and bits of toothpicks and anything that we find. He produces the most amazing tactile resources. He made a lovely tactile castle for one of my students with working drawbridge and portcullis.
Amazing. So everybody should have a husband available who can do that, or a partner available who can do that if you're it's
very handy, yes. But ideally in the schools you'd have people who had the time to make those resources. Or you'd be able to use, I mean, actually this doesn't necessarily take any more money, but you have the links with the design and technology departments to make the resources for the students.
Right. So if there was a kind of connection between what they were doing and what the students who are visually impaired need, then that would be interesting to do, and that wouldn't cost any more time or resources, really.
No, that's just somebody having the time to make those links and to and to make sure that the information gets across. Wow. In an ideal world,
Anything else? It's quite interesting that it sounds like what would make things a lot better is to have more time for people, or the people who are able to spend time on producing these resources, etc. Is the best.
Yeah. So making the resources in multiple formats is very time consuming. So and making resources for our tactile students is phenomenally time consuming. So to make graphs and diagrams for science and for maths for secondary school students in Braille it's phenomenally time consuming. We have some.
What about this onset of artificial intelligence? Do you see any potential of those tools that a lot of teachers are starting to identify as being tools that perhaps can save them time? Would this kind of generative AI provide any potential for your work or for teachers who are dealing with visual impairment, do you think?
That is a good question, and it throws up the fact that I'm not very tuned into what AI can do.
Because you don't have any time. You're too busy rewriting exams and making models, etc. for the students. That's why you haven't.
And making things out of plasticine.
Exactly.
I think it needs to be so bespoke. That it would have to have the sort of the needs of individual students programmed in, which I would worry that it wouldn't, that it tends to be a bit more sort of generic.
But perhaps if there's anyone out there listening who knows a bit more about this or has actually done any work on trying to provide resources for visually impaired or any other special educational needs and disabled students, you can get in touch and we can have them on the program, maybe to as a part 2.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be somebody out there who's at least trying this out, which would be great to hear from them.
I hope so.
So, Lucy, I've picked your brains about this. It's been fascinating just talking to you about all of this. And thank you so much for your time and your answers. I'm sure this is going to be of really great interest to a lot of teachers, if not all, who listen. Is there anything I haven't talked about that you think perhaps teachers should know?
From my notes, I can't find anything else that I haven't said. I think you've asked a lot of very insightful questions, Graham. Thank you very much. It is a whole new world, isn't it?
It is. It talking to you about this just reveals just how ignorant I am about this area, and I think that's probably one of the worries of so many teachers, is that there's so much more that we all could do to help the visually impaired or other SEND students. And it's just a question, as you said before, about having access to information, the time to think about it, the time to reflect on it, or the training, etc. I think, isn't it?
And the more that the students themselves understand their own needs and they're able to communicate that, the better. Yeah, the better it will be for the teachers. Yeah.
So, encouraging the students to kind of own that area more and become more autonomous, I suppose, is an important part of this as well.
Yes, yeah, I definitely agree. Yes.
Okay, so Lucy, are you going to be working tomorrow, preparing things for next week, or are you taking the day off tomorrow?
So I don't work on a Monday. In fact, But yeah, I don't work. I don't get paid to work on a Monday, but I will have to do some work. Yes, yeah. Okay. I've also got a few Euro dishes to make. I'm doing another football food project. Yeah.
Yes, I'll definitely keep an eye on that. For those people listening who are thinking, what is she talking about? Can you explain a little bit more about this? I think it's a fascinating project that you've done for quite a few years now, haven't you?
I did, yeah. So the first one I did was for the World Cup in 2014. I cook a dish from every one of the countries that's taking part, and when it's the World Cup, I have struggled with some of the African cuisine. I have found that quite challenging, but the European cookery is usually a lot easier. So for the Euros, I pick a dish. And this year it's a picnic food and a book for each country. So I'm reading a book from each of the countries as well. So
that's nice. Yeah. That's nice. And I see the latest one is Stanislav Lem, Tales of Pirks the Pilot.
Yeah, that was an interesting read. Yeah. What he thought in 1967, what he thought people would be living on the moon, and yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, I really like reading retro sci-fi. It's quite amusing, but sometimes you find that people have actually predicted things as well, haven't they?
He was a bit ambitious. We were all going to be living on the moon, in colonies on the moon. So yeah, haven't quite got there. Yeah,
people are very disappointed that we're not, traveling holidays in Mars, or we don't have, we're not flying about in jetpacks from house
and
to
hover
house.
Boots. Yes, yeah,
definitely. Wonderful. And so, what's the next dish you're going to be preparing?
So tomorrow we are having Ukrainian beetroot salad. Yeah. I've been roasting the beetroot today.
And when it comes to the Czech Republic or Slovakia, are you going back to those dumplings and remembering those at all food that you had, or have things got better?
Things have got much better. I've been back to the Czech Republic since, and the food was absolutely gorgeous. We had, I've got some nice dishes for those two countries. Yeah,
fantastic. And for the final, which one do you prepare?
So for the end of the tournament, I'll usually do the host because I never know. I can't predict who's going to be in the final. So the last meal will be Germany.
And when it comes to England playing,
it'll be veggie sausage rolls.
Okay, great, fantastic. Yeah. I'll look at it and see if I can replicate one of the dishes that you're making during the tournament. I look forward to that.
Okay. And read the books.
Oh yeah, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
So, Lucy, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed speaking to you.
It's been lovely. Thank you very much, Graham.
It's been great. And, well, we will speak again, I hope, soon. Take care.
Grand. Lovely. Thanks very much. Thank you. Bye.
Imagine having your own instructional coach available 24/7. Now you can with the Teaching How-Tos platform. This highly personalised social platform empowers busy teachers to learn and apply evidence-based teaching techniques, either independently, working collaboratively with their peers, or with our new AI assistant. The platform features over 160 visual guides to teaching techniques, designed to help you quickly and easily implement high-impact practices that boost student engagement and improve learning outcomes. Join over 200 institutions worldwide that are elevating their teaching practices with the How-To app. No gurus, just practical support anytime you need it. Interested in finding out more? Visit teachinghowtos.com and register for our next webinar.
Empowering education with Easy for You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionizes the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy for You, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easyforyou.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading. Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
So that brings us to the end of today's Twilight show. Many thanks to today's special guest, Lucy Mardell, and all of you joined us live. Thank you very much also to any one of you who was listening back to the recording. And so that's it from me. And there are Teachers Talk radio shows all week on all manner of interesting topics. So please listen in live or to some of the many, many recordings that are available. And I hope you will join me again next week at the same time. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.